So in this lecture, we'll be discussing block and inline elements. So block elements are just elements that take up the whole space of the containing element, and they also force line breaks. So when I say take up the whole space, I mean they can take up the width of the container. So what is the container here? So the container here would be the body element, and then your inline elements are just elements that do not take up the space of the container, but take up the space that is necessary. For example, if it has some text, then it will take up that amount of space. So for example, here we have our block elements, all right, our paragraphs and so forth and so on. Of course, if you look at the documentation, so documentation might look something like this. These will be our block level elements. So most of the elements that you've encountered will be your div, your paragraphs, your H1s, your unordered lists, ordered lists, your list items, and so forth and so on. And if you continue to look at the documentation here, so our anchor tags and our span tags would be our inline elements, so they take up as much space as necessary. And there's also a cool little trick that you can do, namely you can change a block level element into an inline element. So for example, here I could just say, well, first let me just add an inline element just to demonstrate how this works. So I'm just going to make an anchor tag. So link, for example, put an href. Okay, so as you can see, it sort of creates a link, but what if I create another link actually? I'm just going to call this link 1. I'm just going to call this link 2. And let me just make another link called link 3 just to show this. As you can see, inline elements, there is no new line break that exists. That's the key difference. So it flows with the text and there's minimal space, and it also does not have any line breaks, right? For block level elements, it's just a line break after the element tag is terminated. So now let me just see if I can make paragraph 3 an inline element. So I'm just going to go to paragraph 3. So I'm going to say display inline in the following way. Now instead of going block, so the default here would be block. So nothing will change. So if I refresh the page, see nothing changes, and now I'm just going to go to inline. In a sense, I have demoted this to an inline element. So let's see what happens. So there we go. So it takes up as much space as necessary. So in a similar fashion, I could also make a span here. Span is an inline element if you look at the documentation. So span, and then I'm going to take the span here, and I'm just going to show this. Let me just change the background color. Well, first of all, I should just make style background dash color. I'm going to make this gold. Actually, let me just make it red, just so it's visible. If I spelled this correctly, it should work. Yeah, there we go. So span is an inline element. What if I wanted to change it to a block element? I could just come here and do select span. Then I'm just going to go display block. There we go. So it's now a block level element. So it will take up as much space of the container. The containing element in this particular case is paragraph 2. So it is contained within paragraph 2. So it will take up the width of the container, right? I mean, you can certainly change the width of this as we've seen in previous lectures. For example, I could change the width of paragraph 1. I could make it 50% of the containing element. So I could just say width 50%, right? So this will force the width. So paragraph 2, let me just do paragraph 1. There you go. So it's 50% of the containing element. That's explicitly stated. So that's how those work, right? So if you wanted to create some space between these links, again, you can just use the break rule or the horizontal rule tags. So for example, I have link 1 here. I could just say PR. So that's how that works. Thank you very much.